So obviously the title is a little bit of a pan towards the MSSPs. We all use them, we all need them, but it's something that we want to make sure that people are understanding what they're getting themselves into. For those that don't know me, my name is Scott Thomas. I work as the Director of Information Security on the global team for Jones Lang LaSalle. Obviously, I do not speak for them. That's just who I work for. I speak for myself, no one else. So why I was looking at giving this talk. So I was sitting in at my desk at work trying to understand contract negotiations with a company that we're currently working with and trying to understand, like, what do we need to do to make this successful? And in talking with a number of the people I know in the industry that have gone through a lot of this stuff and said, you know, we deal with these people, we have to because it's easier to outsource than hire to insource people. You know, I wanted to make sure that I give the knowledge that I had, that the pain that we've gone through in the current process that we're dealing with, as well as what I've done as an MSSP previously when I was a consultant. I will leave time at the end, so if you guys have questions, feel free to either raise your hand. I can stop then and we can answer it then, or we can always do that at the end. I would like this to be a little bit interactive because I know that a lot of people have MSSPs that they deal with, and other people are going to have those same issues, and I want this to be a knowledge share as much from me as it is from all of you to each other as well. Obviously, I'm Cornholio. All right, so the reason that I decided to give this talk is I read a thing on Twitter one time about, if you're going to give a talk, why should you be the one to do it? And I've dealt with a lot of MSSPs. My previous job, we had 5 of them at one time that we outsourced a number of our different projects and programs to, and the interactions between them were difficult, to say the least. I also left that company and went and became an MSSP, and I was a consultant for 2 years, so I know some of the tips and tricks that some of them like to use to say, oh, well, the contract actually means this, and that's how they get around not providing you what you should be getting. I then came back into the corporate world, and I've been dealing with multiple MSSPs again, now in wanting contract negotiations that seem to be never ending. All right, boring stuff's over. So I like dogs. Sorry, dogs are always in my talks. But let's start with before you want to hire an MSSP. Obviously, you're going to have to contract with someone. You want to make sure that you need to make sure what's driving the engagement is what's driving who you're choosing for the MSP, what they're going to do, basically the entire front to back of how this process is going to work. Usually this comes from one of a couple different areas. If this is a management directive, it usually comes from somebody that's, C-level, CIO, CISO, CEO. They may have heard, a quick executive summary on something that, oh, MSSPs are great and you need to do this, or outsourcing is going to save you so much money. There's always some sort of a direction that it's coming from. If you're a CIO, it could be cost related. Obviously, cost is a big thing for a CIO and CEO. They want to make sure that they're getting the most bang for their buck because they need to make sure that the shareholders are getting their value for their money. If you're a director level, obviously Lumberg, managers and directors may not have people on their team that currently meet their skill set. It might be someone where I need a checkbox for a pen test. Obviously, you go to an MSSP for that because they've got people on staff that do that. You may not. Unless you're a larger organization, you probably don't have a red team or an internal pen test team. MSSPs are great for that, so it's a good reason to go to an MSSP to say, I'm going to have some savings in this. I'm going to, go down this road. So if we start with the CISO and the CIO, obviously, everyone wants savings. But why are we paying this much for this or that? Why are we paying for, this company versus that company? There's a number of different reasons you may do it. One thing is that cost savings, you can get cost savings from consultants. The big thing consultants don't do is other duties as assigned. Anybody have that as their job title? A lot of people. So if you're an employee, your manager can come up to you and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. See what you can do with this. Give me some ideas. Give me some some feedback on this. Is this a good idea? Is it not a good idea? Etc. Contractors and consultants don't have that. You can't give them anything and say, hey, I know you're on the clock to do this particular job, but I want you to look into this as well. That's going to end up as a contracted addendum. That's going to end up with, extra money out of your pocket. That's one thing to consider if you are going to go to an MSSP, is that they are usually a single, one-trick pony, a single job that's what they do. You can't throw anything at them, and, obviously contract restrictions, they may be obstinate as well. I saw this on the internet, and I like to use this as the way that a contractor does their job. I push this button. I have so many MSSPs that tell me, well, this is my job. That's all I do. So they push that one button, and they may be ridiculously good at pushing that one button. It may be the best server admin you've ever seen, but that's all they do. You can't tell them, oh, you're a server admin. Okay, I need you to write up the security policy. That's not what they're there for. You need to get somebody else to do that. Has anybody seen the Venn diagram of good, fast, and cheap? I'm going to argue with the Venn diagram of good, fast, and cheap. Has anyone had an MSSP consultant that is good and cheap? Anyone? Not one? No, one. Okay. So usually if you're good and cheap, you're going to be rolled off to a different account, because the company can make more money on you in a different account, so they won't leave you on that account. So you're ending up with good and expensive, or good and fast, where you're paying a lot of money for it, or you get the people that are entry level that are still learning and things like that if you're going to go the cheap route. So it is possible to do savings from this, to say, hey, I'm going to use an MSSP to provide this service or whatever, but it's going to be difficult to get those really, really good people at a cheap price. You're going to have to pay for it. So your savings may not be as big as you think they are. But if you're a CIO or CISO or that, use your network. Everybody's here to network, right? Not everybody has had any coffee here or what? Your network is going to be your best way of understanding what you're getting from that company. Because I guarantee if it's a 3-letter company that you're looking at outsourcing, there's going to be someone in your network that has used them or has experience with them or has dealt with them or had problems with them. And they're going to be the ones that you want to talk to and say, okay, what were the pitfalls that you wish someone would have told you beforehand? Because if that's how you're going to need to get into the contract negotiations with. And obviously, if you're a CISO or a CIO or CTO or any of the C-levels and a CEO comes to you on this, a lot of times they haven't gotten the full picture. They may have seen, I read this in a magazine on an airline. Well, did you read the whole article? Did it tell you that, hey, you can save stuff, but here's the drawbacks to it? A lot of times they haven't. They think that, here's a way to save money, make it happen. And they just want to throw something at their subordinates and say, hey, this is what you need to do, go figure it out. Which that's, what a CEO does. But if you're a CIO or a CISO, make sure that that's what you're looking at. Talk to the CEO and say, okay, give me some details of where you got this information. What do you want to get out of it? How much savings? Is there a percentage, etc.? I did have one story to impart about this type of a thing. I had a CIO previously who was in a town hall and decided that he was going to give a kind of a State of the Union speech or whatever. And he said, we're going to be moving to the cloud. Okay, everybody's moving to the cloud, big deal. So somebody raised their hand. For a change, it wasn't me. And somebody asked, well, why are we moving to the cloud? And he said, because the cloud is more secure. And at least we got a couple chuckles out of that. And I was like, oh, God. Oh, okay. I immediately sent an email while I was sitting there to his assistant. I'm like, I need to get on his calendar. I need to know where he found this information, because that's not true. The cloud could be secure depending on how you configure it. So can it on-prem. But that doesn't mean the cloud is always more secure. And so I had to sit down with this guy for a half an hour to say, okay, what did you understand about this? And he's, I misspoke. I didn't mean that the cloud is more secure. I said the cloud can be secure. I said, well, that's not what you said, so we need to fix this picture, and he never did. So I left that company. All right, so if you're a director or a manager, it could be that you're missing something on your team, and you want to go to an MSSP to try and get something that you are lacking. Obviously, pen test is an easy one to go to because MSSPs are really good at pen tests. They're not as good when you try and bring other people that do different jobs in. They're not always the expert also. Anybody ever seen the YouTube video of the expert? A couple handfuls. There's a YouTube video. It's funny. It's got a guy that's brought in as the expert on lines. And so the client is asking him, well, we want 7 perpendicular lines, some written in red ink, some written in transparent ink. And he's like, well, perpendicular to what? Each other. He's like, well, that can't be done. And whoa, you're the expert, you figure it out. And that's what salespeople are going to do to you. When you're looking at going to do an MSSP, they're going to tell you, oh, we can do everything. We have an expert. And they're going to bring this person in, and being the expert, I've been in those meetings where you get there and you're like, okay, what are we doing? Oh, well, the client wants this. Well, that's not possible. Oh, don't say that. We'll figure it out. You can't figure out impossible. It just doesn't work. So having that, understand your salespeople are going to just sell you anything. That's where you need to start your contract negotiations. Oh, and the other thing that I was going to bring up was, anybody ever had the dealing with a salesperson who said, oh, we have the perfect person for this, but he's rolling off a project. It'll take a while to get him in here. Anybody know why? Exactly. They have to go hire him. That person doesn't exist. A lot of MSSPs do that. They say, oh yeah, we can totally do that. Let us, either figure this out or whatever, and we'll come back to you. That's because they're going to look for someone to do it. They don't necessarily have that in-house. So you don't always get the expert. You may get the next person that they found that has heard that word before. The other thing is do they cover all your needs? A lot of times your MSSPs want to be everything to you. Well, I take that back. Every security, and if there's any vendors here, I'm sorry. Every vendor in that hall over there wants to sell you everything they can for any price that they can get you to pay for it. So they're going to say that they can do anything for you, but that isn't always the case. You can end up with an issue like we had at my current job, where we had an issue with social media. And we said, okay, does anybody do this particular thing for social media? We went to the company that has that social media platform and said, what can we do to try and clean this up and clear out the people that are on that platform? We don't allow that. Oh, okay. And then we get an email back after we had sent out the communication to a bunch of MSSPs. Here's what we want to do. Well, then MSSP says, oh, we can do this. Really? Because the company just said that they don't allow it. We can get around that. Okay, well, show it to us. Oh, well, we'll have to build it. So we'll start a POC contract with you. We'll split the cost with you while we build this out, and then we'll charge a monthly fee for it. I'm not paying for your R&D. You either come to me with a product or you don't come to me at all. So they may not cover all your needs, and it may be back to the same thing where you're like, oh, well, you're going to go hire somebody that can do whatever you think that I want. So they wanted us to spend a lot of money for something that they actually didn't do. Occasionally you will, when you're working with MSSPs, depending on the scale, obviously. If it's something where you're doing an entire program, you may need a server admin, you may need messaging team, whatever. It may be easy for them. They may have run books, they may have playbooks. It may be something that's pretty simple for them to go through and, decide, okay, yeah, I got people that sit on the bench that do this, and they move in. Sure, no problem. The problem when it comes in, when you start to ask for those weird things, the things that you don't necessarily get all the time. Does anybody here do any kind of RPG code review? Nobody, exactly, because nobody does that. So if that's what you're asking for, you're not necessarily going to get it, or you may get back to we'll find somebody to hire to do that. So make sure that what you're paying for is what you're getting. So if you're easy and you get, hey, I need a messaging admin or whatever, that's going to be a cheap fill, and they have those people. If you want something specific, your cost savings may not be there because you need to find someone that does this. So going an MSSP route may not be the answer. I hate efficiency consultants. Nobody works for them, right? Okay, cool. So you get these people that come in, and they want to tell you that, oh, we're going to save you so much money. We're going to identify all the gaps. We're going to identify all the overages and where you have too many people and all this kind of stuff. It basically means layoffs. That's all these people do. They're going to come in and they're going to say, hey, we're going to make these bunch of recommendations and you're going to be saving so much money. But the problem is if they don't make those recommendations to can people, to make people do more than one job, things like that, you're not going to hire them back. You're going to spend all this money and they expect you to save in addition to what you've already spent with them. So if you spent $10 million with them to come in and do an efficiency evaluation of your company, they're going to tell you that you can save $110 million. They don't know how, but that's what they're going to tell you. And it's almost always layoffs. They're going to tell you, well, if you outsource, you can do it so much cheaper. Or if you reduce this group from 3 to 5, or 5 to 3, it'll automatically save you X amount. Well, they're not actually going and talking to the people that do the jobs. They're not actually going through and saying, hey, what do you do? Nobody really talks to you. If anybody's been through this efficiency consultants thing, they never come talk to you and ask you, how do you do your job? Because then they'll start to see the little things like other duties as assigned. They're only going to see the job title and say, oh, you got 4 people that do server admin. Okay, you need 1. Really? Why? Well, that's industry standard is 1 person. Okay, well, so we'll fire 3 people. And all of a sudden that 1 person quits because they've got too much work to do. The big thing to think about with efficiency consultants is who brought them in. A lot of times the CEO wants to do, show a big bottom line increase for the shareholders, but that doesn't necessarily bode well for the company. You have to look at who brought them in, why they brought them in. Maybe it's something that's a bad idea. Usually, like I said, it means layoffs. And that's unfortunately their big MO is, we can outsource and or you have too many people. So they're going to try and say that you spent a lot of money on capital for the HR side and you're not getting anything out of it. Has anybody ever been involved in an efficiency consultant's evaluation? 1 person? 2 people? So it's painful because you get told from on high what actually your job is and how you do it. So your manager may understand that 20% of your time is in threat hunting and 20% is in policy writing, and they may understand because you may have to do a timesheet. But what they don't do is they don't come to your level usually and ask you questions about how you do your job. An example of this is that we had one of the outsourcing companies that we were working with did decide, okay, we're going to bring in these efficiency consultants so that we can evaluate your job so we know how many people to bring in to do your job as part of the outsourcing. I'm like, okay, fine. So they come in. At the time, I worked in ID administration. And they said, ID administration, we got that, no problem. Like, you haven't asked me what I do. We do ID admin, we're fine. Okay, we have 12 people right now that do this. We can do it with 4. How are you going to do our job with 4? We have 9 full-timers and 4 consultants. You can't do this like that. Or actually, we had 13 at the time. How are you going to do that? And they said, we do ID administration across the board. Well, then the consulting company came in, and they actually started to realize what we do. Their team grew to 30 people. Not much of a cost savings there on their part. So the consulting company was not happy. Yeah, I mean, the people themselves were cheaper than what we were being paid, but they had to do more of them to compensate for what we do. So it just didn't work out for them. All right, so anybody think that everything is outsourceable? It's a good idea to outsource anything? I love this GIF. So risk management is one of the things I've continued to fight outsourcing. You cannot outsource your risk effectively because the people themselves that are doing the jobs on the outsourcing side don't care about your company. They care about fulfilling the contract. They care about, did you renew? They care about, are you expanding anything? Are you getting more information so that, you can want to use more of their services? They don't care about, did you get popped or not, unless it's in the contract that they're responsible for that. They just don't care. So it's not something that you want to outsource is your risk management area. You may outsource ID administration. You may outsource, pen testing, things like that. But your risk management, the people that actually evaluate the risks and tell the business what to do as far as like, hey, this is a bad idea. If you want to accept the risk, that's fine, but the business needs to do it. That person is never a good person to do the outsourcing because unfortunately they don't care. They're not going to go to the business with good decisions and say, we understand the way that your business works, and here's why we should not accept this risk. They're just going to say, industry says this is bad. That's not a whole big information. Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
What happens if outsourcing was basically them just hiring an outside fantastic company, and basically it's just supplemental for something that's done annually, and after that they don't need the outsourced company, and you're basically just get back to normal.
Yeah, so the question was, what happens if it's just a checkbox type of an MSSP contract? And those exist. It's definitely like the pen testing side of it is really easy to do that with, because of the fact that they come in, they either run a scan or they do a little bit of data validation in that, and they say, here's your report, and then you get your checkbox. If you're literally looking for that, that's one thing. But most of the time, most people are not looking for a checkbox. The people that are at this conference don't want a checkbox. They want to know what's wrong. They want to know how to fix it.
I guess I could make this question better. What is it? Basically, the only way to not get outsourced is to basically have to deal with onslaught from outsourced companies.
I'm not sure I understand the question. How do you... I mean, it could be if it's something where the management is bringing an MSSP in to do a pen test or whatever to find out if you are doing your job correctly. That's 100% possible. I mean, I haven't seen it personally, but I can definitely see the use case for that. If the manager doesn't trust you that you're not doing your job correctly, then yeah, I can see them bringing in a pen test to say, you said that this was secure and it's not. That's probably a very valid use case. I've just never seen it personally. Yeah.
So you're talking about IT administration being outsourced, but wouldn't it be, laid out with the contract? Are you laying out the contract because IT administration, if something goes wrong with the administration?
I get to that later in the slides about the response if something goes wrong and things like that. Yeah, we'll get to that just in a minute. So if someone does make the decision on, from the C level to say, or director level to say, we need to outsource this particular task, you need to start looking at which company is right for you. Because if, obviously you've got hundreds of companies out there that will do certain jobs, you need to make sure that you get the right one that fits with your culture, fits with your needs and things like that. So it's going to be painful. You're probably going to be pulled in to review certain parts of it. You may not be as involved as you would like to be, but you should at least be involved in some way, shape, or form if it affects your job. You should be able to explain your role, explain what you're expecting from them, things like that. The one thing that I didn't expect when I went to a true global company is your company that you're looking at big enough to support you. This was a big thing for me when I moved to JLL. When we started to say, you get a lot of people, like everyone here has their favorite security company, right? It may be a Trusted Sec. It may be, SecureWorks. I don't know, whoever. And you're going to say, I know them. They're really good. I know the people that work there. They really care. They're going to do us a great job. When you're in my situation, I need people on the ground in Sydney in 12 hours. As much as I love Dave and I love Trusted Sec, he can't put someone on a plane and get them there in 12 hours. So he wouldn't be a good category for like my incident response team. So you need to make sure when you're looking at those type of teams, is that something that they're able to cover your entire spectrum of what you need? And it may be something where you need to go with someone that has a comprehensive global coverage company where they can be in Sydney in 12 hours because they're literally down the road. And unfortunately, that means that you're going to have to look at people like Verizon. You're going to have to look at people like EY. Those type of companies that have that coverage across the globe. So it's a lot of things that you have to think about when you're in your particular role, what works for us. So, another thing I came up with that I hadn't realized before was our data loss prevention has to have people in EMEA. Because this I learned recently in EMEA, when you do data loss prevention, you can't see the person that's doing it. If you're looking at your console, it has to be obfuscated. So you'll see somebody, big string of characters, copy this file off to this location. So then you have to go to your HR and legal teams and say, this happened. What do I do? Then they get involved. They get an investigation started. At some level, then they finally have a process that says, okay, now we can obfuscate that name. Then they actually go through and they talk to the person and things like that. The PII laws in GDPR require that you can't see that stuff. So you need someone in EMEA to do that. So you can't do that remotely. It can't be somebody that's in India that's doing that. So your outsourcing needs to understand that and understand where the MSSP is sitting. Because if it's not in EMEA, they don't qualify. This is another small company problem. So has anybody ever read a contract from start to finish on a managed service provider? Have you looked at the part where it says, if you're unable to do X, Y, Z, and you have to, and they breach for whatever reason the contract itself, they owe X amount of dollars back? Usually it's something where they owe at least a percentage of the total cost of the contract back, if not in addition to any damages that happen. That may bankrupt the company. If it's a small enough company and you contract with them and they do something really bad, that company may no longer exist if you're large enough. That was another thing I didn't think about before I started this most recent contract negotiation. It just, being that I was in a US-based company, I never really had to take that into account because we weren't that big. But if your company is that big, that's something I would look at if I was looking for an MSSP. Can they handle if something goes sideways? And then obviously you're going to want to talk to your references, right? I want to talk to people in my vertical that have used you before, what they've talked to. This is great for that company to provide you if they can. The problem with that is they're going to cherry pick. They're going to go to the companies that say, oh, they did a really great job for us. They're not going to give you the people like, wow, they really suck. It's just, that's not good business for them. They're going to look for the ones that actually, like them before they actually, put them on the phone with you. So go back to your network. Find the people who have used that company. Use Twitter, use networking groups, throw it out on LinkedIn, something to say, hey, I'm looking at company X. Has anybody else used them? Get out of the channel on that and talk to that company and find a real story without working through the MSSP to find out how that company feels about it. It may be that they love it, and maybe they hate it. But I guarantee if it's a 3-letter consulting company, I've worked with 3 of them and I hate them. So I will give more than candid feedback after this of any of the ones I've worked with and good and bad things about them. So if you guys want to ask me after that, feel free. So once you have a company in mind, so once you say, okay, we're going to go with company X, they're big enough for us, they can handle the issues if something goes sideways, we've got good reviews, everybody likes them, they can cover what we need, yeah, we're good, awesome. This is my life lately. Everything goes back and forth because both sides are going to have lawyers involved and both sides are going to try and screw the other one. It just happens. So you're going to get, oh, well, we're going to change this slightly. Oh, we don't like that change. How about we change this slightly? And you're going to go back and forth and they're going to come back to you and say, well, can we get by with doing this part of your job and not this part? Or can we get by with everything except for this piece and we'll do this piece in-house? So you unfortunately will be, It has been my life for 8 freaking months of going back and forth with one vendor right now, just trying to get one contract in place.
How much money are you spending on lawyers?
Too much. Yeah, the lawyers are loving it because they're internal lawyers, but they love the contract language and say, well, that word means this and it doesn't mean this. And it's like, well, it's a word. Like it doesn't really affect the contract that much. But make sure legal is involved. Anybody seen Beverly Hills Cop? The lawyers are going to crawl up your ass with a microscope and they're going to find every little thing that may be wrong with it, which is good for your side. They'll make sure your language is great. They'll make sure that you're protected and that's what they're supposed to do. The lawyers on the other side are going to make sure that they can try and get the most out of it that they can and make sure that they have the most wiggle room in the contract to be able to say, you know what, this is something that we can get by with saying this because we can twist it this way and then we don't have to do it. That's what the lawyers are involved with are for. So your lawyers need to be able to say, this is okay or this is not okay and understand what you're trying to go through. Because if you don't understand, if the lawyers are not technical enough to understand what you're trying to do, they're not going to know the language well enough to know when a company is trying to weasel out of it. The biggest thing that you want to take away from this talk, get everything in writing if possible. Full stop. If it's not in writing, they're going to say we don't do that, or it's not part of the contract, or we can do an addendum for this much extra money. Well, yeah, that's great, but I've already spent all this money on you that you're supposed to be doing this job. Well, yeah, but that particular line item wasn't in the contract. That's where it gets to bite you. Going back to the legal side of things, though, the best thing I saw in a previous contract, as it is today, I heard somebody chuckle on that one. That saved us so much. That the issue where we had with the ID admin side of things, where they came back and they said, you know what? We don't do ID admin like that. Well, the contract says as we do it today. So we were able to say, here's proof of the things that we do today. Here's the requests that we've processed, etc. And they had to bring people in because it was in the contract to say as it was done today. That was our best friend in that contract because it saved us so much effort and so much time that MSSP refused to put it in the next time the contract came around. Alternatively, if something isn't specific in the contract, you can get more out of them than they want you to get out of it. So our current contract we have with an MSSP says they do vulnerability management. I love this because that was my life for almost a decade. So I'm like, okay, let's play this game. Why are we being limited to 2,500 IPs? Well, that was what the contract is. No, it's not. The contract says you do VM for us. Well, the way we based the contract pricing was off of 2,500 IPs. I don't care. Not my problem. We literally went back to them and said, unlock the account because we have more IPs to scan. Well, that would cost more money. Well, that'll cost you more money. It's not costing us anymore. I don't care what you have to pay for it. You said you would do VM for us for this long. The contract hasn't ended yet. Unlock the account. And they had to. So the basics of what I'm trying to tell you is know your contract better than they do. Make sure your lawyers are involved. Make sure, you want everything that you have in that contract the way that you want it. Make sure that you talk to your legal team. Make sure you talk to them and say, here's the things that we want them to do. Here's the contract they're coming back with. Is there a way to make sure that this happens? So the drawback to that is that you end up with a contract with, this is when I was on the MSSP side. Somebody wrote a statement of work prior to when I got there. And my VP came to me and said, okay, in the contract it says we provide this. I don't know what that is. Well, it's written in the contract, so figure it out. But I didn't write the contract. I have no idea what this is. We don't do whatever this is. Well, we have to figure it out because it's in the contract. We have to provide it to them. So as an MSSP, you're looking at going, okay, I don't know. What am I supposed to do? So you had to figure out what that is and hope the client was okay with it. So make sure that when you're going through the contracting process, your MSSP gives you examples of what they're going to do. Because they may be just putting words on paper that they've been using as a boilerplate for years, and then they don't know what that is and they can't provide it to you. So when you go back and you say, well, I didn't get this report. Well, we don't know what that report is. It's not my problem. Another thing that you need to go back to the contract. Make sure that you know the contract better than they do. Oh, and the other thing was make sure your contract doesn't contradict another part of the contract. So your contract may say, we do vuln management. Okay, great. Sounds good. Make sure you read the whole contract because later it may say, if an act of deity happens, we'll do this. Well, in the event of a breach, we'll do your vulnerability management at that point. Well, technically you said you would do it here. Well, yeah, but the caveat is we'll do it in the event of a breach. So make sure you know the entire contract, not just your section. So some people may want to fight the MSSP integration or the rollout to a different MSSP or things like that. I thought about this a lot with writing this talk. Should you fight it? And I've come up with a couple things that I think that yes, maybe you should fight it, but it really depends on your role, what you think they're trying to do with the MSSP, if you think it's good for the company, etc. So the biggest one for me is it would be part of your job and you like your job. Like, I like what I'm doing. I don't want to change it. And the company wants to change it for this reason. Does that reason make sense? Or is this, is this you fighting for your job because you like your job and you don't want to change? Or is this you fighting for your job because you're good at it, you know it's the right thing for your company, and you don't think that MSSPs would be the right way to go? In that situation, if you have the ability to voice your concern and or fight the MSSP move, I would say that's absolutely a good reason to do so. I mean, if you have that clout, that's one thing. If you don't, unfortunately, sometimes you just have to update your resume and let the snake eat itself. I still think it's so bad because unfortunately that snake is in a lot of stress, but it's still a cute picture. But even if you do fight it, sometimes the CEOs just want to make money. And literally, an efficiency consultant or someone in their network or whatever says, "Oh, I saved so much money by, outsourcing to company X." You can, but that doesn't mean you're not going to ruin people's lives. That doesn't mean your company itself is not going to be in a worse risk position. I mean, you outsource stuff to a company that doesn't care about you. And yeah, they'll do it, but they aren't going to do it to the same as people that are inside of the company. All right, so let's say a contract is in place. You have to know where you're working with this MSSP from. You have to know what role you're trying to follow, so you know how to deal with the impending shitstorm. So if you're an analyst and you're a rank and file member of the security team or whatever it is, make friends. I cannot stress this enough. The people that are on the MSSP side, it's not their fault that the contract didn't go the way that it should have. But if you make friends with that group, they're usually more willing to help you out when you need it. Buy them a coffee, send them an email to their boss that they've helped you. Maybe not tell exactly what they did. Just say, person was really helpful. They really, got me out of a tight spot or something like that. That will build a lot of political capital with that team. And in my current role, even though I don't have direct authority over the IT side of things, because I've gone to them and I said, "Hey, how can I help you? What can I help you with? Is there anything I can do for you?" Or when they did go out of their way and above what they should be doing on the contract to help me out with a certain thing, I made sure to contact their manager and say, "Hey, that person was really helpful. I appreciated it. Please make sure that they know I'm happy that they're around." And I have had nothing but good success with that. And obviously your contractors are trying to work within the restraints of the contract, but they may be more willing to help you outside of that if you're not a jerk to them. If you're a director, understand what you're owed. You're going to have things, reports, documentation, whatever it is in the contract that you have that you're supposed to get every day, every week, every month, whatever it is. Know what you're supposed to be getting and make sure you hold them accountable to it. Because they are going to miss stuff. Timeline slip, it happens. It happens to everybody. Make sure that you get an updated timeline. Hey, I can't get this to you on Friday. I'll get it to you on Tuesday. Okay, 2 days slip, not a big deal. If it's, hey, I didn't get the report last month. Oh, yeah, we forgot about that. Okay, well, get on it. Get me that report. It goes back to understanding the contract more than they do. If you're a C-level, they're going to try to screw you over. They want you to pay for stuff that they don't actually have to do because that makes money for them. The way that a lot of MSSPs work is they're going to try and get a efficiency out of putting multiple contracts on one person. John Doe or Jane Doe is this type of a person. They've got 4 accounts that they work on. Well, if they don't have to do as much for their account A, then they can focus more time and they can add another account maybe because they're not giving you what you're supposed to be getting. Make sure you know the contract well enough to know what you're supposed to be getting out of them. The big thing on this one that I like to say, and my coworkers have heard me say this a couple times. Anybody seen Roadhouse? the movie Roadhouse, Patrick Swayze. He's talking to a bunch of bouncers, and he's like, I'm telling you to be nice. Well, be nice until it is time to not be nice. Try to work with the MSSPs. Try to make sure that they understand that you're not just going to let them slide. But then you're going to sometimes have to get to the point to where you are going to have to be the hammer and say, you know what? No, you owe this to me. Figure it out. This is your problem, not mine. I thought that was funny. When you do go ahead and buy some sort of service or a program or whatever it is from an MSSP, understand what you bought from them, to the point that one person made earlier about it being a penetration test. Know that if if it's a task or a project or some small thing, make sure that they give you status check and status updates, give you updates when they slip their timelines, validate their deliverables. If they give you a Nessus scan and they said they were going to do a pen test, does anybody here want to accept that? Yeah, I have given one coworker no end of shit for that, for getting a Nessus scan for a pen test. I was like, we will not do business with this company again. I will make sure of it. So if you get a task or a project and that's what you're paying for, make sure you get what you're paying for. Sometimes you pay for a program, and that's what we're dealing with right now. In my company, we're trying to get an entire program to understand our, where we can expand our security team through a managed service. So are you getting a actual CCERT team out of this, or are you getting a documentation monkey? I literally have in the previous contract a person that they are supposed to file an incident report. Okay, well, what did you? Nope, I just file it. I just write the Word document. Well, what about, I'm not technical, I don't know. Know what you're paying for and make sure they provide that person to you, because they're going to try and get away with giving you the cheapest person they can with whatever you'll accept. Oh, and the other thing is make sure that you talk and make sure they talk between their teams. If you're buying a program and you have somebody that's on a CCERT side and you got somebody that's a security analyst and a SOC analyst and all this kind of stuff, they need to talk if they're all the same company. They should not be telling you to tell that group to what to do and to come back to you to tell that group. You're not a conduit between them. If they're the same MSP, they damn well better talk to each other. And that is a huge bone of contention right now with me. Okay, this one I'm going to get ranty about. A lot of places are doing virtual CISOs now. Not a thing. Especially when you're not, if you've never been a CISO, you're not a virtual CISO now. It doesn't happen. If you don't have the experience, you're not one. Just because somebody slaps a title on you. Some of the people that do this job, I respect. I really do. I understand why they wanted to be a consultant. Now they're at a higher level. They can do consulting in this capacity. If it's something where they need the outside voice, they need the bull in the china shop, whatever it is to get something done on that side, and they say, hey, we need somebody to come in, drop a bunch of this is all bad stuff on our board, and say you need to fix it so that the board understands, because it's somebody coming in from the outside yelling at us. Okay, I get it. But it's not an ideal situation. And especially not someone who's never done it before. We all rant all the time. We all rant on Twitter. We all rant on Reddit. Everybody can rant. Does that person have the experience as a CISO to be a virtual CISO? A lot of them don't. Anyway, and the other thing is, how virtual do you need them? Some of these virtual CISOs are out there. They may come in once a quarter and just say stuff and then they leave. If that's the bull in the china shop that you need, okay, fine, but know how often you need them to be there. If it's something you're expecting them to be there 3 days a week, make sure they're in the office 3 days a week like you contracted them for. Because a lot of times they're going to be, I'm remote, or I'm away at some conference or whatever. Make sure that they give you the time that they are supposed to be giving you. All right, so let's switch to the consulting side. So I was an MSSP consultant for 2 years. I had some tips and tricks that I did work through and tried to understand. I have a contract that I don't know what it means. How can I make the client happy without understanding what the contract means? Biggest question I got when I was an MSSP consultant for vulnerability management: what are other companies in our vertical doing? Most of the verticals we had, one client. Oh, you're an energy sector client. We have you as an energy sector client. So I can't say, well, the other energy sector clients that we have are doing this, because we didn't have any. I wouldn't lie. I would just refuse to do that. So what I would do is I'd change the words a little bit. I can't specifically speak to your vertical, but I have seen other companies do this. When I went to be a consultant, I had 4 or 5 years of experience as vulnerability management for one company. So when I was telling them that, I had seen it at other companies. One. So that's a trick that consultants can use to say, here's some information for you, but it's not necessarily relevant to you. So if you ask them a direct question, make sure you get a direct answer, because they are going to try and wishy-washy answer you. The other one is that as I got farther into it, I did start to use some of my other clients that were in different verticals in that vertical and say, well, other clients that we work with do this. So, I mean, you will get some of that kind of back and forth language. Another thing they're going to do is bring in multiple people under one account. Oh, here's John Doe or Jane Doe, and 6 people are doing the job on the back end. They're responding as that person, but that person may be only on the account 1 day a week. But they're giving you that service with using other people logging into that same account. Make sure that if you have a named person on your account, that named person is who's working on the account. I've seen that with those 3-letter companies multiple times. They bring in somebody and they say, oh, I'm John Doe. Your voice sounds different than I've talked to John Doe a lot, and you're not John Doe. Oh, no, I'm John Doe. Pretty sure you're not. A lot of them do that because a lot of the MSSPs are deliverable based. So they're going to try and throw multiple clients at their consultants so that they get, yeah. Right. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have more than one person on the account. Just understand that. Don't let them sell you one person and then have a bunch of people behind it that may be junior or maybe whatever, that you're not getting what you're supposed to be paying for. If you're paying for a senior analyst, you don't want the senior analyst there for an hour or 2 hours a week, and they've got a bunch of junior analysts doing the work behind the scenes. So yeah, I totally agree with you as far as, the question was, do I feel that it's bad to have more than one person on the account? And it's not necessarily, as long as that's what you're paying for. If you're paying for a service and not a named person, and they say, hey, we're going to throw 5 people at this, fine. I don't care how many people you have to throw at it, as long as it's still this price. It's when they start saying that it's this person, you're paying for a senior analyst, and you're getting somebody that just walked in off the street, you're not going to be happy because you're not going to get the product that you expect. But anyway, the deliverable side of the consultancies, usually they're going to throw multiple projects at one consultant, because if that person works more than 40 hours a week, they get the economy of scale of saying, oh, well, this person's working 60 hours a week. I can give them extra work and still get the same amount of income or more coming in from the client. So they burn out their consultants pretty quick. I'm getting a little short on time. This is painful. Ripping and replacing one program consultant to another is super painful. You're going to end up with a whole bunch of issues, and they're all going to hurt. Every single one of them. Like, seriously going to hurt. So your outgoing team, if you're replacing company X with company A, company X going out isn't going to want to train their replacements. Nobody wants to train their replacement. You're being told, we don't want you anymore. Your job is being given to someone else. Then that's what they're going to do. They're going to, I don't know. We didn't have any documentation, yada, yada. So they're not going to want to do that. The incoming team is going to tell you they weren't trained. They're going to tell you there was no documentation. Make sure that if you're doing a rip and replace, know that it's going to be painful and know that it's going to be a contentious debate between the two of them. Make sure somewhere in your, going back to the contract, make sure that in your contract it says if you leave and, that company is being replaced, that they will provide documentation. Because if they don't tell you what they do now, the new people coming in aren't going to be able to hit the ground running and know how to do the job going forward. So obviously, I talked a lot about MSSPs. If you want to bring it back in-house during the rip and replace, understand, can you afford a full-time or dedicated resource, including everything? A lot of people in here are managers in that and procure people into the company. Think about that when you're looking at bringing it back in-house. If you pay a consultant $100 an hour and you pay somebody else $50 or $60 an hour, what is the makeup of the benefits for that person? Does it go over that $100 an hour? Figure out if you want to have that person with other duties as assigned for maybe a little bit extra cost versus having the MSSP come in. All right. So the wrap up for this is know your contract. Everybody's seen the film from Microsoft 95, I think it was, Windows 95 with Steve Ballmer, developers. Contract. Know your contract backwards, forwards, inside out, and upside down. I mean, if you know it better than them, you're going to be in such a better position than if they know it better than you. And I think I have just a couple of minutes for questions. Anyone?
What is the size of contract, where this would make sense? I mean, it looks like that you have to hire an attorney if you don't earn something.
Right. So the question was, what size of a company would this be good for? The two companies that I've dealt with, as far as the being a procurement side for the consultants, has been pretty substantial. Usually 6, 8, 10,000 people or above. Being a consultant, I've seen a number of the smaller companies where their security team is one person. They unfortunately don't have the legal team in that to get involved. So the security person needs to be that, eyes on the contract to go through it and understand, what they're getting into and try it as best they can, make sure that it's in the contract where it can be. I mean, unfortunately, without the budget for lawyers, that's as good as you can do. Yeah, usually when you're talking about contracts this size, it's in the millions of dollars anyway. I'll be outside afterwards if anybody else wants to have any questions. Thank you.